Welcome to True.
Fire, the First Technology, Chapter 1, The Dawn of Fire. The story of fire is the story of humanity itself, long before we built cities, wrote books, or looked up at the stars with understanding. We learned to harness flame. This single achievement separated us from every other species on Earth and set us on a path that would lead to civilization, technology, and the modern world. Fire transformed our ancestors from clever apes into something entirely new. It gave us warmth in the cold, light in the darkness, and protection from predators. It allowed us to cook our food, making nutrients more accessible and unlocking energy that fueled the growth of our brains. Fire became the hearth around which communities gathered, the forge in which tools were made, and the beacon that guided us through the longest nights of our evolution. But who discovered fire? Who first held a burning branch and understood its power? The answer is far more complex and fascinating than any single moment of genius. The discovery of fire was not an invention in the way we typically think of inventions. It was a relationship, a slow, dangerous dance between curiosity and flame that played out over hundreds of thousands of years. Chapter 2: Fire Before Humanity. To understand how humans discovered fire, we must first understand that fire existed long before we did. Fire is a natural phenomenon, as old as terrestrial plant life itself. Lightning strikes have ignited forests for hundreds of millions of years. Volcanic eruptions have sent rivers of molten rock across landscapes, setting everything in their path ablaze. Even the friction of rocks tumbling down mountainsides, or the spontaneous combustion of certain materials have sparked flames. Our earliest ancestors would have encountered fire regularly. They would have seen it destroy and create, consume and cleanse. They would have observed how animals fled from it, how it turned dense forest into open grassland, and how new growth emerged from the ashes. They would have noticed that fire-swept areas attracted grazing animals in the months that followed, drawn by the tender new shoots that sprouted from the burned ground. The earliest hominids, our distant relatives who walked upright but had brains not much larger than modern apes, lived in a world where fire was a force of nature to be feared and avoided. They had no more control over it than they had over the weather or the movements of the sun, but they were intelligent enough to notice it, to remember it, and to begin forming ideas about what it was and what it did. Evidence from archaeological sites suggests that our ancestors may have been aware of fire and its effects for millions of years before they learned to control it. Some researchers believe that early hominids followed in the wake of natural fires, scavenging the cooked remains of animals that had perished in the flames. This would have given them their first taste of cooked meat, softer, easier to chew, and more digestible than raw flesh. Chapter 3: The First Fire Users. The question of who first controlled fire is one of the most debated topics in paleoanthropology. The evidence is fragmentary, contested, and often ambiguous. But from the scattered traces left behind in ancient caves and open-air sites, we can begin to piece together a picture of humanity's first steps toward mastering flame. The earliest convincing evidence of controlled fire use comes from the Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, where burnt bones and plant remains date to approximately 1 million years ago. These traces suggest that Homo erectus, an early human ancestor, was using fire by this time. However, whether they were creating fire or simply maintaining flames from natural sources remains unclear. Other significant sites include Gesher Benot Yaakov in Israel, where evidence of repeated fire use dates to around 790,000 years ago, and various sites across Africa, Europe, and Asia that show sporadic evidence of fire use between 1 million and 400,000 years ago. What these sites tell us is that the use of fire was not a single invention, but rather a gradual process of learning and experimentation that occurred across multiple populations over vast stretches of time. Homo erectus, who lived from approximately 1.9 million to 110,000 years ago, appears to have been the first hominin to have a sustained relationship with fire. These early humans had larger brains than their predecessors, and were capable of more complex thought and planning. They were also the first to migrate out of Africa in significant numbers, spreading across Asia and into Europe. Some researchers believe that the control of fire was essential to this migration, providing warmth and protection in the colder climates they encountered. But even among Homo erectus populations, fire use was not universal or constant. Many sites from this period show no evidence of fire at all, suggesting that the knowledge of how to make and maintain fire was not yet widespread. It may have been discovered and lost multiple times, existing as fragile knowledge held by small groups before being forgotten or abandoned. Chapter 4: Learning to Make Fire. There is a crucial distinction between using fire and making fire. Using fire means taking advantage of naturally occurring flames, maintaining a fire started by lightning, carrying embers from one location to another, or feeding an existing fire to keep it alive. Making fire means creating flame from scratch, through human action alone. The ability to make fire on demand was a revolutionary development, but it came much later than the first use of fire. While evidence suggests humans were using fire by 1 million years ago, reliable evidence for the intentional creation of fire only appears much more recently, perhaps as late as 50,000 to 100,000 years ago, though this timeline is still debated. The methods our ancestors used to create fire were based on principles that remain familiar today: friction, percussion, and eventually, chemistry. The two primary ancient methods were the fire drill and the strike-a-light technique. The fire drill method involves rotating a wooden spindle against a wooden base, creating friction that produces hot wood dust. With enough speed and pressure, this dust can reach temperatures high enough to ignite tinder, dry, easily combustible material like grass, bark, or fungus. This method requires skill, patience, and the right materials. The wood must be dry, but not too hard, the tinder must be properly prepared, and the technique must be executed with sustained effort. Archaeological evidence and ethnographic studies of traditional societies show that many different variations of the fire drill existed. Some cultures used a bow to spin the drill, creating faster rotation with less effort. Others used a hand drill, spinning the stick between their palms. Still others developed the fire plow, dragging a stick along a groove in another piece of wood to create friction. The strike-a-light method involves striking a hard stone, typically flint, against another hard material, often pyrite or marcasite, to create sparks. These sparks are directed onto tinder, where they can ignite a flame. This method is faster than friction-based techniques, but requires specific materials that were not available everywhere. Learning to make fire was not a simple matter of discovering a technique. It required deep knowledge of materials, an understanding of the properties of different woods and stones, and the ability to identify and prepare proper tinder. It required experimentation, failure, and perseverance, and critically, it required the ability to teach these skills to others, passing knowledge across generations. Chapter 5: Fire and Human Evolution. The impact of fire on human evolution cannot be overstated. It fundamentally altered our biology, our social structures, and our relationship with the environment. Some anthropologists argue that we did not simply discover fire, we co-evolved with it, becoming a species whose very nature is intertwined with flame. The most significant biological impact of fire was on our diet and digestion. Cooking food, whether meat, tubers, or other plant materials, breaks down tough fibers and proteins, making nutrients more bioavailable. Cooked food requires less energy to digest, meaning more calories can be devoted to other bodily functions, particularly the brain. The human brain is an energy-hungry organ, consuming approximately 20% of our body's total energy. Despite representing only about 2% of our body weight, the adoption of cooking likely provided the caloric surplus necessary to support the development of larger, more complex brains. Some researchers, including primatologist Richard Wrangham, have argued that cooking was not just beneficial to brain development, but essential, that we could not have evolved our current brain size without it. Fire also changed our anatomy in other ways. Compared to other primates, humans have remarkably small teeth and weak jaws. We also have relatively short digestive tracts. These features make sense in the context of a species that processes much of its food with fire before eating it. Cooking serves as a form of external digestion, doing work that our teeth and guts would otherwise have to perform. Beyond its biological impacts, fire transformed human social life. The hearth became the center of community. Fire provided a gathering place where people could come together after dark, safe from predators and the cold. Around the fire, early humans likely engaged in storytelling, teaching, and the development of language and culture. Fire extended the day, allowing productive activities to continue after sunset. It created a space of warmth and light in the darkness, a pocket of safety in a dangerous world. These nightly gatherings around the fire may have been crucial to the development of complex language, abstract thought, and the transmission of culture across generations. Chapter 6: Fire as Technology. Once humans learned to create and control fire, they began to use it in increasingly sophisticated ways. Fire was not just a source of warmth and light, it was humanity's first true technology, a tool that could be applied to transform materials and shape the environment. One of the earliest technological applications of fire was in tool making. Heat treatment of stone, particularly flint, changes its properties, making it easier to flake and shape into tools. Evidence of heat-treated stone tools dates back at least 164,000 years in South Africa, and possibly earlier elsewhere. This technique requires careful control of temperature and timing, demonstrating sophisticated understanding of material properties. Fire was also used to harden wooden spears. The oldest known wooden spears, found in Schöningen, Germany, date to approximately 400,000 years ago. While we cannot be certain these were fire-hardened, experimental archaeology has shown that treating wooden points with heat makes them significantly more durable and effective as weapons. As human societies developed, the applications of fire multiplied. Fire was used to clear land, making it easier to hunt and later to cultivate crops. Controlled burning of grasslands and forests created open areas that attracted game animals and promoted the growth of useful plants. This practice, known as fire stick farming, was used by indigenous peoples around the world and had profound effects on ecosystems. Fire enabled the creation of new materials. The discovery that clay could be hardened into pottery by firing it in intense heat revolutionized human ability to store food and water. Pottery appears in the archaeological record at different times in different places, with some of the earliest examples dating to around 20,000 years ago in China. The smelting of metals, extracting pure metal from ore using heat, was another revolutionary application of fire. Copper was being smelted by 7,000 years ago in the Middle East. Bronze, an alloy of copper and tin, followed by around 5,000 years ago. Iron smelting, which requires even higher temperatures, emerged around 3,200 years ago. Each of these developments opened new possibilities for tools, weapons, and art. Chapter 7: Fire in Mythology and Culture. Given fire's central importance to human life, it is no surprise that it features prominently in the myths and stories of cultures around the world. These myths often grapple with the same question we have been exploring: how did humans gain control of fire? In Greek mythology, the Titan Prometheus stole fire from the gods and gave it to humanity. For this transgression, Zeus punished him by chaining him to a rock where an eagle would eat his liver each day, only for it to regenerate each night. This myth reflects the understanding that fire was a world-changing gift, something that elevated humans but also carried danger and responsibility. Hindu mythology tells of Agni, the god of fire, who serves as a messenger between humans and the divine. Fire is sacred in Hindu tradition, playing a central role in religious ceremonies and rituals. The lighting and maintenance of the sacred fire represents the presence of the divine in human affairs. In many indigenous Australian traditions, fire was brought to humans by animals or ancestral beings. One common story tells of a hawk or eagle that carried burning sticks from a lightning-struck tree and dropped them where humans could find them. These stories often emphasize the need to maintain fire carefully, as losing it could mean death. Native American traditions include numerous fire origin stories. In some, fire is stolen from powerful beings by clever animals like coyote or raven. In others, it is given as a gift to those who prove themselves worthy through bravery or cleverness. These stories often emphasize cooperation, with many animals working together to bring fire to humanity. What these myths share is a recognition that fire is special, powerful, and somehow outside the normal order of things. They reflect the understanding that fire gave humans capabilities beyond those of other animals, but also imposed new responsibilities and dangers. Chapter 8. Fire's Dark Side. For all its benefits, fire has always been a double-edged tool. Uncontrolled fire destroys homes, forests, and lives. Even controlled fire carries risks. Burns were likely common injuries among our ancestors, and smoke inhalation from indoor fires has caused respiratory problems throughout human history. As human populations grew and societies became more complex, the dangers of fire multiplied. Cities with their densely packed wooden buildings were especially vulnerable. The Great Fire of Rome in 64 CE destroyed much of the city. The Great Fire of London in 1666 consumed more than 13,000 houses. Before modern firefighting techniques and building codes, urban fires were a constant threat. Warfare has long exploited fire's destructive power. Greek fire, an incendiary weapon developed by the Byzantine Empire in the 7th century, could burn even on water and was nearly impossible to extinguish. Firebombing in World War II devastated cities across Europe and Asia. The atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki killed many victims through the firestorms they created. In the modern era, our use of fire has created new problems on a global scale. The burning of fossil fuels, essentially ancient stored solar energy captured by plants millions of years ago, has driven economic growth and technological advancement, but it has also released enormous quantities of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, driving climate change that threatens ecosystems and human societies around the world. Wildfires, always a natural part of many ecosystems, have become more frequent and intense as temperatures rise and droughts become more severe. Paradoxically, a century of fire suppression in many regions has allowed fuel to accumulate, making fires more destructive when they do occur. Chapter 9. The Science of Fire. What exactly is fire? For most of human history, this question had no clear answer. Fire seemed like a fundamental element, something basic and irreducible. The ancient Greeks classified it as one of the 4 elements, alongside earth, water, and air. The true nature of fire was not understood until the development of modern chemistry in the 18th century. We now know that fire is not a substance at all, but a process, a rapid chemical reaction called combustion. When a material burns, it combines with oxygen in the air, breaking chemical bonds and releasing energy in the form of heat and light. For combustion to occur, 3 things are necessary: fuel, oxygen, and heat. This is sometimes called the fire triangle. Remove any one of these elements, and the fire will go out. This understanding underlies all modern firefighting techniques, removing fuel by creating fire breaks, excluding oxygen with foam or carbon dioxide, or removing heat with water. The visible flame we see when something burns is actually glowing gas, heated molecules of fuel that have been vaporized by the heat of the fire. Different substances produce different colored flames, depending on their chemical composition. The yellow-orange color of most fires comes from glowing particles of soot and completely burned carbon. Hotter fires, with more complete combustion, burn with a blue flame. The smoke produced by fire is a mixture of gases, water vapor, and tiny particles of unburned or partially burned material. While we often think of smoke as a harmless byproduct of fire, it is actually responsible for most fire-related deaths, causing asphyxiation and toxic poisoning long before flames reach victims. Understanding the chemistry of fire has allowed us to develop new materials that resist burning, better methods for fighting fires, and more efficient ways to harness fire's energy, but it has also revealed the complexity of fire's effects on the environment and human health, from the production of greenhouse gases to the creation of toxic compounds and incomplete combustion. Chapter 10. Fire in the Modern World. In the 21st century, our relationship with fire has changed dramatically, yet remains fundamentally important. Most people in developed nations rarely encounter open flame in their daily lives. We cook with electric or gas stoves that produce controlled, regulated heat. We heat our homes with central heating systems. We light our spaces with electric bulbs. Yet fire remains at the heart of modern civilization. Most of our electricity is generated by burning fuel, whether fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas, or biomass materials. Internal combustion engines, which power most vehicles, work by carefully controlled explosions of fuel and air. Industrial processes from steel production to cement manufacturing rely on intense heat from combustion. Even technologies that seem far removed from fire often depend on it. The servers that run the internet, the data centers that store our information, the factories that produce our electronics, most are powered by electricity generated through combustion. In this sense, we live in a civilization built on fire, even if we no longer see the flames. Some newer technologies seek to move beyond combustion. Solar panels convert sunlight directly to electricity. Wind turbines harvest kinetic energy from air movement. Nuclear power generates heat through atomic fission rather than chemical combustion. Battery technology allows us to store energy without burning fuel, yet even these technologies often require combustion in their manufacturing, and fossil fuels remain the dominant energy source worldwide. The challenge facing humanity in the coming decades is to maintain the benefits fire has given us, energy, industry, and prosperity, while managing its negative consequences. Climate change, driven largely by combustion of fossil fuels, presents an existential threat. Air pollution from burning fuels kills millions each year. The question is not whether we will use fire, but how we will use it. Chapter 11: The Future of Fire. What role will fire play in humanity's future? The answer depends on the choices we make in the coming years. We stand at a crossroads between different energy futures, each with different implications for our relationship with combustion. One path leads toward continued and even increased reliance on combustion, but with different fuels and better technology. Biofuels grown from plants offer a potentially carbon-neutral alternative to fossil fuels, as the carbon dioxide released when they burn was recently captured from the atmosphere by growing plants. Hydrogen, which produces only water when burned, could power vehicles and generate electricity. Carbon capture technology could remove carbon dioxide from combustion processes before it enters the atmosphere. Another path leads toward moving beyond combustion altogether. Solar, wind, and nuclear energy could provide electricity without burning anything. Electric vehicles could replace internal combustion engines. Heat pumps could replace furnaces. In this future, fire would still exist, but it would no longer be the foundation of our energy system. A third possibility is a mixed approach, using combustion where it makes sense while developing alternatives where they work better. This seems most likely in the near term, as the transition away from fossil fuels will take decades and will happen at different rates in different parts of the world. Whatever path we take, fire will remain important to human culture and experience. The appeal of fire is not purely practical. There is something deeply satisfying about sitting by a fire, watching the flames dance, feeling the warmth on your skin. Campfires, fireplaces, and candles remain popular not because they are the most efficient sources of heat and light, but because fire speaks to something fundamental in human nature. Chapter 12: Conclusion: Fire and what it means to be human. No one person invented fire. It was discovered, tamed, and mastered gradually over hundreds of thousands of years by countless individuals whose names we will never know. It was learned and lost and relearned, passed down through generations, improved upon through experimentation and insight. The story of fire is the story of human ingenuity, curiosity, and determination. It is a story of taking something dangerous and making it useful, of transforming the natural world through technology, of building knowledge and culture across generations. Every time we flip a light switch, cook a meal, or warm ourselves on a cold day, we are benefiting from the accumulated wisdom of our ancestors reaching back to the very beginning of our species. Fire made us human in profound ways. It shaped our bodies, giving us smaller teeth and larger brains. It shaped our societies, creating gathering places and enabling cooperation. It shaped our minds, requiring planning, patience, and the transmission of complex knowledge. And it shaped our world, giving us the power to transform materials, clear land, and build civilizations. We now stand at a moment in history where our mastery of fire has given us capabilities our ancestors could never have imagined. We can harness energies that would have seemed like magic to early humans. We can warm entire cities, light up the night, fly through the air, and communicate instantly across the globe, all ultimately powered by controlled combustion. But we have also reached the limits of what fire can safely give us. Climate change, driven by over a century of burning fossil fuels on an industrial scale, threatens to disrupt the stable climate that allowed human civilization to flourish. We must now learn to harness energy without filling the atmosphere with carbon dioxide to maintain the benefits of fire while mitigating its harms. This is perhaps the greatest challenge our species has ever faced, and meeting it will require the same qualities that allowed our ancestors to master fire in the first place: ingenuity, cooperation, patience, and the ability to learn and pass knowledge across generations. Fire gave us the power to change the world. Now we must use that power wisely to build a future where all people can flourish without destroying the climate and ecosystems on which we all depend. The story of fire is not over. We are still writing it every day through the choices we make about how to power our lives and our civilization. Our ancestors learned to control fire and used it to light the darkness, warm the cold, and forge a path to the modern world. Now it is our turn to write the next chapter, to use the gifts fire has given us to build a sustainable future. The flame that has guided humanity for 1,000,000 years still burns. Where it leads from here is up to us.